Hello everyone, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. We really appreciate you being with us here on this Sunday. We do have a lot of stuff to get into today. Details of the FBI's Kavanaugh inquiry brought about by Jeff Flake show its restricted range today, as the New York Times report details everything wrong, that could possibly be a little bit problematic with it. Judge Kavanaugh, Chris Garrett, Mark Judge, Patrick Smith, Leland Kaiser, and Christine Blasey Ford, all people who the FBI could address. What's going on? What's the problem with these six people, and how do they fit into the night in question? Also, we'll take a look at some of the infactual statements, just to say the least, with Kavanaugh's testimony. Also take a look at Kavanaugh's election effect, and as well, we will discuss how Jeff Flake played a role in all this. And finally, we're going to review a case for possibly packing the Supreme Court, do a little bit of FBR-style plan of politics, and is that an effective strategy? Me and Glenn will discuss. It's going to be at the end of the show. And, of course, we're so happy to welcome back to Newsflash, Glenn Bradford. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's great to be on with you again, Spencer. It feels like a long time.
Yeah, I think it's been since, middle of August. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right. And we're going to get into a lot of very important things today. And first of all, I just do want to start, since we haven't talked in a while, what is your takeaway on some of the... What's your takeaway on the Kavanaugh hearing?
Well, I assume you mean the latest one where they reopened his confirmation because of all these sexual misconduct allegations. It was quite amazing. It was a spectacle, really. The first half had the testimony of Dr. Ford, and she was very convincing, very credible. It was fairly routine, except what was a little different, of course, was that the Republican senators didn't ask questions. They hired a sex crimes prosecutor out of Phoenix to do the questioning for them. She was fine. She did a professional job. And so the first half of it went pretty well, I thought, for Dr. Ford. And then the second half, when Kavanaugh came on, it just got crazy. His opening statements were very, very emotional. It looked like he was breaking down. It looked like he was really losing it. He just barely held it together. And he was defiant, and he said things that a judge would never say. Not a federal judge, not a judge trying to get on the Supreme Court. He was complaining that this was a political hit job by Democrats and by the Clintons, all because they lost the election, and this is how they were going to get back at the Republicans. And then it just kept going off the rails once the senators started asking questions. He was defiant and indignant. He didn't treat the Democratic senators with very much respect. At one point, the prosecutor they had hired stopped asking questions because the Republican senators jumped in once Lindsey Graham went off with his tirade. And the second half was just a huge political theater and spectacle, and it was really quite amazing.
Yeah, it was quite a show of, again, politics from Kavanaugh, and it was just a mind-blowing. Imagine, like, for example, if the roles were reversed, and Christine Blasey Ford came out and acted like that in what was supposed to be her job interview. you can only imagine if you're yelling and you're screaming and you're calling half, say there are 2 interviews are there and you're applying for a high-level job and you call one of them trying to take you down, if you accuse one of them trying to take you down for political reasons, you're probably not going to get the job on top of all the other things you're already accused of. And that just shows you, where we are and how different the standards are for powerful people, at least in the town of Washington, D.C. So then we're going to get to this a little bit more in detail, but I was wondering if you could tell me, because now there has been a little bit of an FBI investigation here, and a new report from the New York Times by Michael Shear, Nicholas Fandos, and Michael Schmidt, they really detailed about how this Jeff Flake, he delayed a vote in Kavanaugh, and it led to an FBI investigation, and that seems like it should be something that we should dive into a little bit, because it's going to be the basic details are it's going to be about a week. That's the time limit. It could stop shorter than a week, and that's going to be very, very interesting. So, so surrounded by his colleagues, the report begins in a cramped corridor behind the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Jeff Flake was in agony, getting pounded on all sides, and this kind of shows the old political rule: when you try to appeal to everyone, or just the rule in life, when you try to appeal to everyone, you end up appealing to no one. He has already released a statement that said he would vote yes in committee and advance Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court to the full Senate floor. Then, obviously, 2 angry and tearful women, as I'm sure you probably have heard by now, had confronted him, and soon afterwards, in a Senate elevator, accusing him of telling girls that assault does not matter. Now the committee was on the verge of approving the notion, and Jeff Flake of Arizona was having second thoughts. So, Glenn, from what you've heard, how is it, what was the role that this played in his decision, this confrontation, this remarkable confrontation at the elevator?
Yeah, so it was really a remarkable moment in the Senate building there. Jeff Flake had just moments before, this was in the morning, I guess it was it Friday? Was it just 2 days ago? It seems so long ago now. He had been undecided as to how he would vote, along with a few other key senators. But everyone knew that he was agonizing over this decision. You could see it written all over his face during the confirmation hearing. When it was his turn to question Kavanaugh, he only took about a minute of his time, and he didn't ask any questions. He just apologized to both Ford and Kavanaugh for for what the Senate was putting them through, and you really just couldn't tell which side he was on, and I don't honestly think he knew either. But sometime the following morning on Friday, he put out a statement that he was going to vote for Judge Kavanaugh. Later that morning, there was a scheduled vote to vote him out of committee, and he was the deciding vote, because the committee has 11 Republicans and 10 Democrats, and he was the swing vote. Everyone else was going to vote along party lines. So just minutes after that, he was on his way to the meeting where they were going to make this vote, and he was taking an elevator in the building, and these 2 women cornered him in the elevator and trapped him in there, and basically yelled and berated at him in very emotional terms that he was voting to not listen to sexual assault survivors, and he was going to put them into positions of power, and he was just ignoring what women were saying. And I don't, they said it a lot better than I just did, but it was very compelling, very emotional. You could see that Flake was moved by what they were saying. He had difficulty looking at the women in the eye. One of them said, look at me when I'm talking. And you could see him briefly look up and acknowledge her. And finally, at the end, he said, I have to go, but thank you. And then when he got to the Senate Judiciary Committee room, where all the other senators were already seated and ready to vote, senators had been taking turns at that point making final speeches and arguments for one way or the other. And just a little before, I guess it was in the afternoon, for some reason the vote got delayed from the morning until the afternoon. But at some point, Flake got up, and and this was just after Senator Coons had made a speech that requested an FBI investigation be done.
And I think I'm just going to have to quickly stop you there, because that kind of you're getting a little bit too far, but it's okay. So like pretty much what happened then is, according to this New York Times report, is that the Democrats then it was kind of like they were in the hall, and they were Democrats and Republicans kind of both talking at him, it seemed. So John Conran and Tom Tillis were like, it's just a delaying tactic. It's going to hurt the judge's family. Only more allegations are going to come out. Don't do it. And then the Democrats were on the other side, coaxing him to put off the vote. So then Chris Coons, who's a friend of Flake's, is a Democrat of Delaware. I think they went to like Africa at some point together. This is a mess, he said, and it could lift the cloud over Judge Kavanaugh, and an investigation was necessary. And he said, but what could really be done in a week? So then they tried to call Chris Wray, who was the FBI director. He could not be reached, though. The second choice was Rod Rosenstein. And apparently they went into an oversized phone booth, and they needed privacy rather than a landline, so a cell phone on speaker between them. They just put a cell phone on speaker between them, and Rosenstein told them the FBI could complete a background check in a week, although it was unlikely to unearth much more than was already known. Minutes later, Mr. Flake, a pained expression on his face, returned to the committee room and made that announcement that you were just about to speak of, that the FBI investigation, of course, would go forward. So, yeah, and what are we really going to expect, Glenn, from this investigation? Are we going to see real a change here? Is this a cause for success?
We don't know. We don't know what the FBI will uncover, and we don't know how deeply they'll delve into this case. A background check isn't typically, run like a criminal investigation. So it's not clear. If they just go out and talk to witnesses and don't do much more, then I'm not sure how much more facts will come out of this. They could, if they wanted to, I think, really try to find out which house this assault happened in, and try to piece together the timeline more. But I'm not sure that's what they're directed to do in this kind of background check investigation. But this is an unusual background check because of the seriousness of the allegations. So it could be that the FBI goes a step further here, and they are given a week, and they could marshal a lot of resources, a lot of FBI agents around the country to all work on this, and they could probably learn a good deal in a week. And so far, the reporting that we've gotten about exactly how the FBI is going to run this hasn't really uncovered how they're going to do it. We know that they've approached the second accuser, Ms. Ramirez, and that they're going to talk to her.